Welcome to Strata. I'm Glenn.
And I'm Brandon. Welcome to the Minds on Muscle podcast. Hey everyone, this is Brandon from Minds on Muscle, and I'm here with Glenn.
Hello.
And we are talking to you from Strata, and we wanted to do something a little bit different today. So if you're following along with the way things are going in Ontario is kind of an unfun time to be a fitness professional and in a fitness facility. So we haven't been able to work. We haven't seen too many clients. And Glenn and I and everyone else here at Strata has been doing everything we possibly can to get our feet going, working on other projects, trying to push the province to let us get back to work. So Glenn and I thought we'd do something a little different. We definitely like the academic, uplifting style of podcast. But today we're just going to talk. We're going to talk a little bit about each other. We're going to ask each other some questions and see where we end up and make something a little more casual. Perhaps it'll be slightly cathartic for Glenn and I in a fun way, but hopefully you guys can learn a little bit more about us. And you can say, hey, I liked that. Hey, I didn't like that. Glenn, why did you say that weird thing with the movies that you like? And Brandon, why do you talk so funny? We can clear all that up today and we can figure out where we're going to go from there. So Glenn, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. And listen, we can ask fitness questions too. It doesn't just have to be personal stuff. We can ask whatever we want. Just thought a game of 20 questions would be a fun little side podcast for us to be trying on today.
So I'm going to have to ask you 20 questions or I got to ask you 10?
We can just start going, and if we end up playing 8 questions and it goes on tangents, that's fine too. Let's just see where it goes.
All right. Well, we're going to start with questions.
Okay, beautiful.
Where do you want to start, Glenn?
Brandon, top 3 movies of all time.
Top 3 movies. That's an interesting question. I'll be honest with you. If you ask my wife, I'm absolutely terrible at remembering actors, movies, and I do enjoy movies. I'm 100% a Marvel Studios nerd. My first job was at a comic book store painting figurines, getting paid in figurines back in paint so I could continue painting. So I was around comic books my entire childhood while playing sports. That was a whole weird relationship. So top movies. It would be really easy for me to stick within the Marvel world.
Go for it.
But I would definitely say that Marvel's Endgame and Infinity War are probably, as a movie, I would say, one of my favorites. Recently, I have come back around to love with the Austin Powers movies.
Okay, right on.
Honestly, it's so funny because watching those when I was younger, they're amazing movies. But the way that Mike Myers just writes material is absolutely hilarious, and it makes me laugh every time. So definitely an Austin Powers movie, which is probably from someone who's a cinematic expert movie. And then third movie, you know what, as much as it's probably super cliche, I'd probably have to say Gladiator is probably something that's like.
That's cliche?
You know what, I think it's one of those movies that like, everybody would say is on their radar for being, but it was a very historic movie, I'd say, at the time when it came out, because there wasn't too much, Spartan, gladiator, Roman Empire era stuff at that time. It was really gory and intense, great story. And then there was a whole consortia of things that came after that, like that. So that's what I'd say. It's a nice little even mix, I think.
I think so. Well, Kurt Russell in his prime is amazing, and a lot of Mike Myers movies really hold up well over time.
And bringing it around to fitness, I gotta say Pumping Iron by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, I was going to say that. Yeah, that's a great movie.
Oh, I stole it. What are your favorite 3 movies?
I was definitely put Pumping Iron up there. That must be one I've watched at least 10 times. And I like to rewatch some movies, but not a crazy amount. Pumping Iron, the original, just amazing. I recently read his autobiography, and he talks about doing the movie and some of the stuff behind the scenes. So it's fantastic. And just kind of gets you in the mood to train too and exercise, right? Like you watch him exercise and you see all these golden age bodybuilders get their pump on and not even bothering to spray tan, but just trying to just go tan naturally on the beach. I'm a big fan. It's hard to narrow down the movies, Brandon, because I'm a fairly big cinephile. I love going to the movie theaters, even though we only had in Toronto like a modified stage 3 for a month and a half. I still managed to go to the theater like 3 or 4 times.
Nice.
So if I had to put other ones up there, one that always comes to my brain, The Fifth Element. I like the sci-fi action. I'm a big Bruce Willis fan. Mila Jovovich is also fairly well known in the sci-fi horror circles. She's a fantastic performance. And of course, Chris Tucker playing Ruby Rhod. Excellent comedic relief. Love that. And I don't want to harp on Bruce Willis too much, but I love the Die Hard movies. Big fan of the Die Hard movies. I love Die Hard 1. I thought it was fantastic. If you ever get an opportunity, the movies that made us on Netflix has they do an episode on Die Hard and all the stuff that went wrong, all the stuff that went well, and they actually talk about how Bruce Willis They didn't think he was going to be very good for the part. He was actually like the 20th pick down the line. They went through like Bruce Willis, they went through Sly Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nobody wanted to do it. And he was known as this kind of like romantic lead in a TV show. So they took a risk with him. They ended up paying $5 million because no one else wanted to do it. So it's a supply and demand issue, and it skyrocketed his action career. So I love that. I love that Netflix special. Love Bruce Willis, but I put those three up as my top three. Brandon.
Awesome. I got a question for you.
Yes, go for it. What's up?
What is your favorite exercise?
Ooh, my favorite exercise, Pilates. No, I'm just kidding. It's not Pilates. So we often talk about this on this podcast, is having no favorites. It's really about, finding the right peg for the right hole, so to speak. And that goes for your anatomy and physiology, marrying forces and physics with it. But exercises that I just like to do for myself that are just fun. I like training my back. I like doing rowing exercises, I like doing pull-ups, all that fun stuff. I would say if I had to choose one, even though I don't do it very often, are bent over barbell rows. I don't even get a very good pump. I don't even really feel it that much when I do it, but I just like doing it. It's enjoyable. Maybe I just like the way it looks in the mirror. Bent over barbell rows. I'm going to ask you the same question, but I think you're going to say deadlifts, but I don't know. But Brandon, same question. Favorite exercise in the gym?
I would say I got three exercises, and one is for what it does, one is for the achievement, and then one is for how it feels.
Oh, wow.
So one of my favorite exercises as far as just how it changes with my bodybuilding goals, I'm a huge fan of lateral raises. I love doing lateral raises and working on my shoulders that way. I think it's a logical exercise to try and grow shoulder muscles. That's something you're trying to do. So that's when you're reaching your arm out to the side. I love that exercise. Yeah. So lateral raises. Yes, my favorite exercise for the achievement is deadlifts. I was definitely a big deadlifter. It's funny because I actually think that deadlifts are one of the most illogical exercises you can possibly do in the gym for multiple reasons, but it's still one of my favorites as far as, and I would consider it more of a sport for me than a health exercise. It's much more about like, hey, can I do this? How can I do this? How does it feel on my back? I love it. I mean, picking up 400 plus pounds is just really fun. And then as far as exercise, I just love the way that it feels. I would say single arm cable pull down is one of my favorite exercises that I haven't done in many years because the gym here at Strata, I really didn't have a way to do it. And then I kind of and came with an option quite literally a few months ago, and it's just really fallen in love with it. The way that it folds, the way that my body folds up, the way that I can use momentum strategically to help me get to an end range position. I just love it. So single arm cable pull downs, deadlifts, and lateral raises, dumbbell or cable lateral raises, I would say are my favorite exercises. If I had to pick one that I was going to do, the only one I'd probably would be deadlift.
So follow-up question. You had mentioned that you think deadlift is a nonsensical exercise. Those are my words, not your words, but would you educate us as to why you feel that is the case?
Well, I definitely would say that it's not that a feeling. It's really taking a summation of information. It's an illogical exercise for a few reasons. First and foremost, the implement that we're choosing uses a bar, right? So whenever you do a exercise that has some degree of restraint, like a bar or a machine, you do have to force your body motions around that thing. So a barbell is a single plane exercise device that you have to make sure your wrists can get into that position. You have to make sure your shoulders can get into that position. Depending on which grip and variation you choose, you have to make sure all your joints have the requirements to follow the path of the exercise. So for a deadlift, you have to make sure you have the wrist requirements, the elbow requirements, the shoulder requirements, and the spine requirements, the knee and the hip and the foot requirements, really everything to even have that path go all the way down. I think it's illogical for another reason because generally speaking, it's traditionally taught as a full range of motion from the ground exercise. And if you do it in that way, for most people, especially if your proportions don't let you fold up the right way, you can't get all the way down to the ground. The other side of it, taking both of those things, is since the bar being in front of your legs, your knees cannot travel forward enough to allow you to fold up properly like in a squat or if you're sitting down in a chair. So you have this bar in front of your knees, which means that when you do the deadlift, your hips get shoved back behind you and behind your heels to do two things. It creates a counterbalance between the weight of the machine, of the weight of the barbell and the weight and you. So your butt contributes to creating a more of a teeter-totter between the stuff in the front, the stuff in the back. But also it's just to help make sure that you don't smash your knees and your thighs, because since your knees can't travel forward, your hips have to go back, which when you end up in that position of being in a V shape where you've got a lot of hip flexion, your glutes, hamstrings, and a lot of lower back tissues, more the glutes and the hamstring muscles, hip extensors, if you will, are in lengthened position, and they start to get to the weaker end of the length tension relationship. So you actually get to the bottom. So at the bottom, you get extremes of joint position, muscles in relatively weaker positions. You have forced kinematic positions based off of the bar, and you have all these different strikes against you to help you pick that exercise up. There's a couple of things you can easily do to get around that, which I do about half the time. One is using a trap bar, which puts the center of mass right through your body, so your knees can travel forward or back if you need to. So that works out pretty well. The other side of the equation is offloading the barbell or offloading the trap bar deadlift, having some bands making it lighter near the bottom. So the actual resistance of the exercise is lighter at the bottom where you're in a weaker position. Anyway, blah, 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 blah.
But Brandon, how do you really feel about the deadlift?
I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
So follow-up question for you. Deadlift, it almost sounds like, I don't say it's a guilty pleasure exercise, but done traditionally, it is almost would you say in your view, it's a guilty pleasure exercise, something you would do in the traditional way because you enjoy doing it more than it makes sense for your anatomy and physiology?
I wouldn't say guilty pleasure. I mean, I guess you could look at it in that sense, but I would say it much more as that's where I would call it when I talk to my clients as a sport, because in my opinion, sports like hockey, soccer, whatever it may be, you do those things for the enjoyment of it and the challenge. I mean, at least for me, if I were playing a sport, half of it would be the enjoyment of the activity and the socializing or the independent activity. And the second part would be, this is kind of an assessment to see, can my body do this? How well do I perform? At 33 years old, I cannot deadlift what I used to be able to do when I was 23 years old for a couple of different reasons, but I still can do a lot with no pain, no problems, and I feel 100% fine at the end of the set and the next day. So for me, it's kind of like two things. It's a bit of an assessment, but also maintenance is progression kind of thing. If I can maintain, being able to deadlift 425 pounds or whatever it may be now over the years, provided I can maintain control over it, I may be able to do it when I'm 40 and 50.
See, what I'm loving right now is we're marinating this podcast in some fun outside the questions. We're also bringing the health and fitness into it as well. So I have a follow-up question because you asked me about my favorite exercise, and then I asked you, and now I'm gonna throw another one back at you, Brandon. I would like to know your favorite food, but two subcategories. One, favorite food that might be a little bit more of a guilty pleasure or an anytime food, something you might not typically eat on a day-to-day that's more of a treat for you. But then also some kind of food that you know is good for you and you try to make it a part of your day-to-day life because you know it fuels your body and allows you to keep doing all the stuff that you love doing through the day.
Healthy food, I can answer that super easy. And the second one, I'm going to do two different options, the guilty pleasure.
Fantastic.
So
amazing.
Healthy food that I absolutely love is a meal that my wife and I have kind of evolved over the years. And it's this kale chip salad, I would call it. So what we do is we take kale covered in olive oil, salt, and maybe a little bit of spice, throw it in the oven for 340 for 15 minutes. So we create these nice little kale chips. I'll take some ground beef or some sort of ground up, broken up meat, usually about 7 ounces, throw it in the microwave or make it right on the spot. And then I'll throw in maybe about a half cup of rice in there. I'm having a little more carbohydrates depending on how I'm working out. Sometimes carbs, sometimes not. I take all that from in town here. There's these hot peppers from a place called Zuko's. So I take Zuko's hot peppers, the kale salad, some rice, and then some sort of chopped up meat, mix it all together with the tiniest bit of sugar-free Caesar salad dressing. I mean, literally a little bit. And that's my favorite healthy meal. I have that honestly lately, like 2 or 3 nights a week. I had it last night. It's light. It helps me sleep because a little bit of rice just kind of gets me into a place where I can sleep a little bit better. I feel recovered and refreshed the next day. I love it. Guilty pleasure. I would say there's kind of two that I would absolutely, if I were left alone at my house and I were going to order it, I would order one of these two, or I would go 100% is all you can eat sushi.
Oh, preach, brother.
I've been all you can eat sushi. And it's a funny story about that too. How I even got there because I did not like sushi, and it was kind of forced upon me when I was doing my co-op at the first gym I worked at. And then the second is honestly like barbecue wings and ribs and all that stuff and then like gross French fries and stuff like that, like barbecue food. So the sushi story, it's actually kind of funny. The first gym that I worked at was Persicini Fitness, and I was doing a co-op there. And on my third day, Mario, 300-pound bodybuilder, Giancarlo, 240-pound soccer player, big guy, and a girl named Sam, who was a really like strong rugby player. They said, hey, let's take the kid out for sushi. So, I was 17 years old at the time. They took me to all you can eat sushi. And we're sitting there and I'm like, I've never had this before. I'll try a few pieces. They order all the all you can eat food. You know how it is, right? You order all you can eat food. And if whatever you don't eat, you got to pay like $2 per piece. So Giancarlo, right after we ordered, gets this note saying that he's got this huge family dinner in an hour and a half. That's like super important. And he was getting married or something like that. And he needed to be there to eat. And he's like, I can't eat all this food. And so they both looked at me. All three of them looked at me. And they started smashing sushi down my mouth. And I had to like just shove it in there. So I'm trying everything, smashing it in. And all of a sudden after that, I just started to fall in love with it. There were certainly things I remember not liking, like udon or eel. I think that's what it is. Yeah. Brutal.
Udon are the noodles, I think.
That's
udon
right.
The noodles. I don't know what the eel
Nigiri?
is. Maybe.
Anyway, don't like eel, but octopus, salmon, tuna, sashimi. I love all that stuff now. And one of my favorite things that I used to do that was a cathartic thing pre-COVID was there was a sushi place up the street here.
General Sushi?
Yeah, and I would go there, pre-Maxwell, like once a week on a lunch break and go sit there for 45 minutes, work on some stuff and just eat alone and being quiet and eat all you can eat sushi. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I missed that too. My Luz and I actually went to go to the movies last week, and we are going to go to General Sushi, and we swung by and they're closed for COVID. They're not even delivering or anything like that. I hope they make it out of this thing, because I would hate to see them go. But I love sushi as well. It's fantastic.
So what about you? What's your healthy-ish meal, and then what is your less healthy meal?
So for me, healthy meals are a little bit harder because I like to rotate food in and out. I can never really stick to one thing. But personally, nothing gets me feeling better than a good old prime rib roast. So I get a prime rib roast, 5 pounds. I put a little salt and pepper on the outside there, some thyme and rosemary, put like a real thick coating of that on there, let it sit for an hour, slow cooking on the barbecue for a couple hours. And I have myself 3 or 4 days of prime rib for dinner in the evening. I like having a little bit more fat in my diet. I have a little bit less carbohydrate. I know you do some cyclical ketogenic dieting, so you're probably very similar in some regard. Yep. So that makes, and by the way, if you're the kind of person that eats a lot of carbohydrates for lunch and you get super tired in the afternoon, consider saving them for the evening and just having some like fat and protein and vegetables for lunch. It'll change the way you feel your energy in the afternoon. At least it did for me. And then as Brandon said, when you transfer some of those carbs to the evening, it kind of puts you right out in the evening. You get a nice, good sleep. So that's kind of the way I've been doing things a little bit more recently. But prime rib roast, every other week, because it is a little bit more of an expensive cut of meat. I'll have that. In terms of guilty pleasure foods, I can name a couple for sure. But the two I'm going to go with are one, Loblaws has a wonderful chocolate cake. They have these like 8-inch chocolate cakes. I love them. If left on my own devices, I will get them. The missus is out of town this weekend with her friends. We're at a cottage in her little social network. So I've already picked up myself a cake. I put it in the freezer, and I know it's going to be happening on Friday when I got the boys store, I should say. And
having the boys over with some chocolate cake. What are you doing this weekend? Having the boys over with cake.
Hot tub and chocolate cake. That's what we're doing.
Hot tub and cake.
And then if I had to say the other one is I love movie theater popcorn. I love the movie theater experience. Movie theater popcorn is pretty much as bad as you get in my books. But when I go to the movie theaters, especially when it's a date night, I like to go. The missus and I will order a nice large Diet Pepsi, we'll order a nice large popcorn. We'll split it in two. We'll get those little dill shakers, the ketchup shakers. I get ketchup, she gets dill. And put those on the popcorn and we'll eat that. I think it's delicious. I can't get enough of it. We don't have the whole make it yourself at home kettle of corn thing because we'd be having it every week and it would be a problem. And as an adjunct to that, if you're the kind of person that knows they're going to eat those sweet foods that they love, those cheat foods, and you have them in the house, get rid of them. I think the golden rule of junk food is that if you have it in the house, it's going to get eaten eventually. So if you don't want to have it and you don't want to eat it, don't buy it. And then when you are ready to buy it, go out and get it and then have it, because that'll save you a lot of impromptu binge eating. At least it does for me, so to speak. Right.
So if you're having the boys over, have some chocolate cake. Speaking of Glenn and treats, one of the first times that Glenn and I were getting together as in a professional relationship, I was working at another facility and Glenn wanted to come see me for some assessment process of what I was doing. And I had a conversation. We were collecting what I do is I meet with somebody, ask them what they're here for, and then we do an assessment session. And so we set up the assessment session. Glenn comes in and Glenn goes, "Hey, listen, My stomach's upset. I had Shreddies and cheese. What was that? Shreddies and cheese?
Mini wheats. It was mini wheats and cheese for dinner.
Mini wheats and cheese for dinner. My tummy's not too happy. And we had a good laugh about mini wheats and cheese. So how often do you have mini wheats and cheese now?
Never. I think that might have been the last time, actually. But I'm not opposed to doing it. I just not something I would want to do.
Hey, boys, come on over. Let's have some mini wheats and cheese.
And chocolate cake. So much. Give me all the dairy. Brandon, let's bring it back to another question I have for you. Either favorite books that you've read recently or books that you've reread a couple times that you keep coming back to. We can do one professional and then one maybe personal or fictional or something that's just not inside your regular health and exercise realm.
I think one of the books that I've read a couple times that I would say it's a little weird. I read it when I was in high school and I've read it a few times is actually One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Really?
Yeah. I just find it's a really interesting book. I mean, talking about someone being in a psych ward and all the experiences they have. I forget what year it is, but I mean, I think it's many decades ago where they're still doing lobotomies and stuff like that. Yeah. It's a really interesting perspective when you're reading it from the eyes of one of the people in the home and kind of the things they're experiencing and trying to figure out, hey, is this an actual real scenario or is this a psych episode that you're reading about? I think it's a really interesting book. I like that a lot. Academic book, I would say there's two that I've read a couple times, one recently and one not so recently. One is Norman Joich's The Brain That Changes Itself. I think for anybody who wants to learn more about how the body adapts over time, neuroplasticity, that's a great book. And then Seth Godin's Tribes, I would say is another book that I absolutely love. I think you've read that one as well too.
No, I have not read that one. No.
I love it. I love the idea of learning more about tribes and culture. I think, religions, cults, tribes. I mean, it's a very interesting thing to study because I think that if you're in business or community building land, regardless of how you view community, tribe, religion, cults, all these things, there are some really interesting parallels between all these things. And so Seth Godin's Tribes is a really interesting book. It's not about cults and religion by any means, but I do find learning more about group mentality, group bias, leadership bias, all that kind of stuff, really, really interesting. How about you?
I might just talk about books in general because I have a hard time narrowing it down. I do a lot of reading. I probably make it through 25 books a year or so. Wow. A large portion of those are fiction. I'm a big fan of the Jack Reacher series by Lee Child. His younger brother now, Andrew Child, is starting to take over now that Lee Child's getting to be, I think his 70s, maybe close to his 80s. But I love those books. They're books I read before bed often. I love reading fiction before bed. I find it's a great way to put me to sleep and get into that restful state. It's a part of my evening routine. So a couple hours before bed, I put on my yellow glasses, my blue blocking glasses. And then half an hour before bed, I start to read. And honestly, maybe 10 or 15 minutes sometimes it all takes of reading before I'm ready to conk right out. So I love reading those fiction books. I'm very excited because the latest one came out yesterday, The Sentinel. And so when I'm finishing my current Jack Reacher book, one that I missed in the series, I'm going to go back to that. So I love the Jack Reacher series. When it comes to professional books or personal growth and development, I suppose we can bracket it into. One book that I've read a couple times I keep coming back to, and it has a bit of a misleading name, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Because the book title sounds like you're trying to take advantage of people. That's usually where the word influence is tied into, or winning over. Win is often very competitively used in its phrasing. But it's really just a basic look into the psychology of how people understand each other, into communication, how to have people feel welcome and liked and feel comfortable around you. It's like a very practical psychology book in a sense, and I really, really like it. It's one. I mean, it is by Dale Carnegie, who also wrote what's that book he wrote? How to Think and Grow Rich, I think, which is a very popular book. Did, yeah. That one is I'm not a huge fan of. It seems very convoluted to me, but there's a reason this book, written I guess almost 100 years ago at this point, if not 90 or 80 at the most, has been something that people keep coming back to. It's because it's so easy to read and so influential. So I put that one up there in terms of one of my big growth books. And I mean, it's really hard to parse out which fitness book or exercise book really had a large impact on me. But one book that definitely got me started on the right path that I love as a reference guide once in a while, just to bring me back to my roots because it's a pleasurable read. Gary Bannister has a book. I think it's called something like If you think you know about exercise and fitness, you're probably doing it wrong. Is that what it is?
I've got that over there somewhere. Yeah, that's a great book.
Fantastic book. So Gary Bannister was essentially, I want to say, almost like a disciple of what's that novelist guy?
Arthur Jones.
Oh my goodness. I was going to say Andrew Jones, a disciple of Arthur Jones. And I use that very loosely, but a lot of people that follow Arthur Jones did follow him to a T. And Arthur Jones was one of the first people that really came out with a really physiology based approach to exercise and training. So much so that people like Johnny Carson had him on to talk about fitness and exercise. I mean, we don't really have that anymore. Like late night show people don't have health and fitness people on to talk about that kind of stuff. It's very entertainment based, but they had Arthur Jones on. So this is a really great book that kind of dispels a lot of the myths and kind of makes force and exercise a little bit more easier to digest for the lay person. And when I first started getting exposed to the resistance training specialist world, which was one of my early exposures to really my thought process in terms of exercise, this was a book that fell into my hands from a fellow muscle system specialist, Dave Ferday. He recommended it to me. Great guy, very logical thinker. And I love it. And if you're someone who's really into health and fitness and you're liking the podcast, you kind of like the way that Brad and I think, highly recommend this book. I think you can get it on Amazon, but I would say those three books are kind of some of my favorites when it comes to stuff that I just read for myself, but also to help better myself in both my career from a technical level, but also from all that other stuff level that we all kind of have to deal with in this world.
And that Arthur Jones is someone who's completely nuts. But
absolutely bananas. What was that quote he had about personal trainers saying they love back squats and throwing them into a mountain? Do you remember?
No,
that quote?
He was talking about. He was, this is really bad. So this is not my opinion. This is more just a paraphrase quote, But he was doing a presentation at some sort of university. He was standing at an auditorium and he said, one of the best things that could happen to the health and fitness industry is if you took all the strength and conditioning coaches for professional sports teams, took them into a jumbo jet and flew them into the side of a mountain. It would be probably one of the best things that could happen to the exercise. Bad. I mean, so Arthur Jones created a really cool exercise machine idea. He had some really unique processes. He definitely lied about some of the experiments that he said he was doing to try and show how much muscle you could grow. But I believe he was a pivotal person in the exercise machine land, allowed us to end up where we are now with Prime and Strive and Nautilus and so forth. I mean, he was trying to breed the world's most poisonous snakes at one point. There was rumors that he was involved with one of the mobs, or CIA or something like that. Completely crazy. But if you want to learn more about that, look up Arthur Jones. You can find up a ton of stuff because there's still a bunch of Arthur Jones-ites out there. So on that note, being that this is the Minds on Muscle podcast.
Lovely.
Glenn, for you, of all of the different academic thought process, philosophical concepts that you've learned over the last 10 years, is there one thing that you remember learning that was kind of a paradigm shifting thing for you?
Bro, how much we talk about the Certified Muscle System Specialist program right now? How much are we going to talk about that? I'm going to give two things though. I had exposure to something called the Resistance Training Specialist program from a colleague of ours, Roland Pankowicz, now really down into the health and gut world, but he did do exercise for a long time and he got me into, he said, you really got to try it. And the thing I got from the Resistance Training Specialist course, more than anything else, was how to think about exercise and how to have a general thought process about exercise, really how to bring the scientific process in terms of thinking to exercise, right? And not just thinking about exercise, but thinking about it rationally, the most rationally. And then from there, I would say through you, I would say is my primary driver, but also through Dave Ferday, got introduced to the Certified Muscle System Specialist program. And this is where I really got an excellent framework for how do we marry physics and how do we marry physiology? How do we marry anatomy? How do we marry the human psyche and psychology? How do we bring all this stuff together so that we can treat and work with our clients and have them get the best results? And so where Resistance Training Specialist really gave me a great way to think about exercise from a very technical perspective, the Muscle System Specialist took that, went really in depth with it, but also layered on the how to work with people piece. Because people are very complex, not just their human bodies. I mean, you think about a knee, there are people who are doctors whose job is just to do knee replacements or just to do ACL injuries. And that's all they do all day. And they have 8 to 10 years of knowledge just working with that one area alone. And think about what we've got to do from a level of working with the entire human body and the entire human psyche. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant what this course has to offer. So I couldn't say enough good things about it. I wouldn't even know how to talk about even any more in depth without doing a podcast on it, which we should absolutely maybe do for the next one. Talk about that
next
course.
week. Muscle system specialist. We're doing it next week.
We will do it next week. But I would say those are the two big ones, the resistance training specialist course. And now I'm so infatuated in love with the certified muscle system specialist course. The Mac Attack, Greg Mack, who is the largest driver and founder behind it, is always sending out new information. Sent us out new information this morning about submaximal treadmill tests. I love it. So I'm going to go with those two. You can tell when I get excited about something, I'll keep talking about it. I'll say the same things over and over. So I'll digress. Brandon, I'm going to throw that question back at you. Which programs or people or influence have you had that made the most profound impact on where you are today as an exercise professional?
3 instances, pretty easy. First instance would be a combination of Peter Chasen and Tom Purvis doing, resistance training specialist program, but going all the way from resistance training specialist to the RTS mastery in Oklahoma. Peter Chasen definitely opened my eye. And I should say Mario Mavridis, who was my original mentor in the exercise land. If he's listening to this, between Mario, Peter, and Tom, the three of them were this nice cascade of evolution from rethinking exercise all the way to developing a thought process. And I would absolutely say everything that I learned up to Tom Purvis, I still feel like I'm learning things from the stuff that I learned from Tom Purvis, because Peter and Mario, yes, but Tom really helped to refine how to have a thought process. And I sent him a message a few weeks ago. Honestly, Tom is someone that, really helped to shape how I think about things. And if it weren't for the resistance training specialist mastery program, going to Oklahoma 5, 6 or 7 times, teaching for that program, being around Tom so much, I wouldn't have the foundation I am today. So I'd say absolutely Tom Purvis, resistance training specialist program, now exercise professional education. I owe a ton to him and Peter and Mario in that same vein. Second one would for sure be the muscle system specialist, but it's an original inception in 2014, client intake, because client intake from a business perspective and also learning about muscles and changing how we would evaluate the system from one side to the other absolutely changed my framework of how I operate my entire business, and 100% owe that sales process, communication process, how I am today to that original introduction to the program. And honestly, if it weren't for that program, Strata would not exist here today, because I failed to know how to take all the information and thought process I had and deliver it in a way that mattered to any client. And so that's what the client intake / muscle system specialist program did, which we'll talk more about that next week. And then the third one is a combination of the Muscle System Consortia's manual muscle testing course and my friend Charlie McMillan talking to me about post-activation potentiation, leading to my own course that I developed. The revisiting of all of that information absolutely helped to modify my framework of how I think about putting my hands on somebody, contractions, therapeutic approaches to exercise, not that I do, but just how other people experience it, and what's happening with skeletal muscle when you make it contract for the first time or not, versus a myometric, isometric, and plyometric contraction. I know that was a lot of stuff, but those 3 things all together, I would say, really is how I think about how my entire thought process is framed. And I'm happy to question it and challenge it. In fact, I've actively looked for other programs and education and mentors to challenge the information. But every time I do, I fall back on research that I was presented through PubMed and looking at biomechanical anatomy through Kapandji manuals and joint structure and function. And you can see that, these 3 things for me are the most logical place, and I'm happy to learn more. But yeah, those are the pivotal things for me.
Well, Brandon, I got one more question before we get out of here. And this entire episode's kind of been like this, but what is your pick of the week?
Dang. The whole episode was a pick of the week.
Right? I thought so.
Pick of the week right now.
Do your best.
I will say Lindt 99% dark chocolate.
Oh.
Honestly, sitting right here. It is the high energy. It's pretty much just pure fat. It gives me super energy. I love it. I'll just have a few pieces, and it's not really about craving chocolate. It is quite literally healthy, clean fats. I have to say Lindt's 99% dark chocolate. Sir?
No, I'm looking at this right here. I'm loving this here. 1 bar, 320 calories, 26 grams of fat, 14 grams of carbohydrates, 10 of which are fiber, and a whopping 8 grams of protein. All that is about the macros. But not bad, Brandon.
Lots of energy, helps with your boom booms. Glenn, what's your pick of the week?
Your boom booms. Oh my goodness. This entire episode did feel like a pick of the week. I didn't even prepare a pick of the week. Off the top of my head, what is my pick of the week? My pick of the week is the movie. I don't know. I'm blanking here, to be honest with you. Here's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Christmas. That's right. Coming out strong. Brandon sitting beside me, smiling and nodding away. Because why? Because it's October. But after this weekend, October 31st, Halloween, this Saturday, the glorious season of Christmas is upon us. I love Christmas. I love the love and sharing that I get to see with my family. I like the caroling. I like the presents and gift giving and the merriness. And it makes those first couple cold, bitter months of the winter go a little bit more smoothly. And above all, you guessed it, my favorite Christmas thing, Die Hard movies. Yes, Die Hard 1 and Die Hard 2 will be watched back to back. I love it. Boosie W giving me the feels. I love it. It makes me super happy. My pick of the week is Christmas.
So if you two are frustrated and alone on Christmas and you want to hang out with the boys eating chocolate cake, watching Die Hard, you can call Glenn and he will have you over for hot tub cake and Die Hard.
My phone number is 555-5555.
Extension Die Hard. All right, everybody. So if you're listening to this next week, Glenn and I are going to talk about the Muscle System Specialist Program. It's crazy turbulent time trying to organize schedules, but one of the things Glenn and I do have in queue is we've talked about Mr. Greg Mack a few times. We do want to have Greg Mack on. We are going to do an interview with him, and we're excited to do that. So next week, Glenn and I will talk about the Muscle System Specialist Program, and since we're rolling out in this direction, maybe we can even touch base with Mr. Mack and see if we can make that happen, because I think that would be a lot of fun.
Mack Attack. I'd love to have him on here.
It'd be absolutely great.
So everyone, if you enjoy this podcast, please like us, give us a review, share with a friend. We'd love to help and reach more people. You can find us on YouTube, Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. These are our platforms, and we'd love to see you on there more often. Brandon, brick and mortar, where are we at?
Well, we're closed right now, unfortunately, because of Ontario COVID-19 restrictions. But if you're listening this in the future, hopefully late 2020 or early 2021, we are in Newmarket at Leslie and Davis Drive. Basically, if you want to come check us out, we'd love to show you the facility, all the cool equipment, Strata Internal Performance. Please give us a thumbs up, give us a 5-star rating. If you can, share this podcast. It's a bit of a fun episode for Glenn and I to go through some different stuff. Next week, we're on the Muscle System Specialist Program.
Everybody, have the best day.
And enjoy your Wheaties and cheese. Talk to you later.
All right.